Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and I'm here with Chris Trujillo, production designer, the Emmy-nominated production designer for Stranger Things. And congrats on another Emmy nomination for you. It's great work this episode, this whole season. And season 4 of Stranger Things really must have been a huge undertaking for you because the characters are split in so many places, from Hawkins to California to Russia to the Upside Down. So what was your first reaction, when you saw the sheer scope of spaces you'd have to create?
I mean, I was really excited. It was really nice to know that we were going to get outside of Hawkins, obviously staying within the language of Stranger Things. But yeah, I mean, I think probably what was most exciting was knowing that we were going to kind of get to visit the wider world, which we've not done much. We've mostly been inside of Hawkins, and we've gotten to kind of elaborate on Hawkins and sort of expand it and explore it. But yeah, it was really exciting when we discovered that we are going to be spending all this time in these other sort of like distinctly different locations. I think it was really nice. It was a nice change for sure.
Yeah, it certainly expands the world. And you're nominated specifically for Chapter 7, The Massacre at Hawkins Lab. And this episode, I think, kind of showcases something about your design specific to this show, where you have a lot of locations that have to exist in the real world as well as in the Upside Down. So when you look at, designing a set, do you have to, from the get-go, think of it in both spaces, or what is the process like there?
Yeah, well, I mean, since the first season, we kind of knew that, any and all real world locations were liable to end up, in an upside down version. So yeah, I mean, we're always kind of aware of what that might need to look like. I mean, we've kind of dialed in our approach to the upside down, and it's kind of applicable to any. I mean, you can kind of pick any of our right side up sets, and I can pretty immediately imagine how they want to feel in the upside down now, because we've kind of dialed in that really specific sort of the details of what the upside down feels like. But yeah, I mean, in this case, we kind of got into these weird sort of liminal spaces where, like, with the Vecna stuff, it was, in addition to being in the upside down, like with the Creel house, for instance, it was like the Creel house existed in a past sort of pristine state, and then it existed in the our kind of dilapidated real world right side up, and then it also existed in the upside down, and then it also had an iteration where it was sort of the base layer of Vecna's mindscape, is what we called it. So I mean, yeah, we definitely got even more kind of expansive in what a given set needed to do for us. But yeah, I mean, that was probably the biggest change and expansion this season, was having to kind of realize those multiple layers of that set in particular. But yeah, I mean, and generally, I think, we've dialed in a look that I'm really happy with, in terms of, especially on the interior work that we do in the upside down, when we spend some time in the Wheeler house, which was really exciting, because we've always seen it as this sort of aspirational suburban home where the happy family lives. So that was fun, because we got to completely netherize. We call it, well, from season 1 we called it the nether. So that's kind of the art department. We still use that sort of vernacular, what we call the upside down, the nether, and we're netherizing these sets. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to see some of these other sets in the upside down.
Yeah. What I'm always curious, what goes into constructing those vines? Because it seems like you must have to make thousands of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an ongoing process of refining how we kind of manufacture that stuff. And this season, for sure, I think we did, I mean, just a mind-boggling amount of square footage of, I mean, because all the vinage is physical. I mean, we have to physically manufacture it, and our special effects team is incredible, and we tested and have tested over the years a million different materials. I mean, everything from like various gauges of rope and sort of like rubberized materials, and we use pool noodles, and some of them have like metal armature inside of them. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we sort of like single-handedly backed up like a number of supply chains because of just the sheer volume of these very specific materials that we need to create the nether. And we had this season 4, we had this kind of perpetually this shop, a shop set up specifically to just be perpetually cranking out nether vines, just knowing how much volume we needed for the various sets. Yeah, it's become like a real factory creating upside down materials.
Mhm. And in this episode in particular, we get, I think, our first ever glimpse of sort of the unformed upside
Right.
down when Vecna is first shot into there. Um, did you always have a knowledge of that state of the upside down since you've worked with the Duffers for so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think they always had a pretty good idea that it was this, that the upside down in a way. I mean, in a way, the upside down is almost this kind of this amalgamation of this alternate dimension where we discover that number one gets kind of pushed into this separate dimension, and like he essentially realizes like, oh, I can use what I've found here to sort of create this world of my own, and ultimately kind of lay in wait for the time when the dimension opens up again and get back into this to the reality, which is Hawkins. But yeah, I think the Duffers, to their credit, always had a vision for that. We never fully fleshed it out. Obviously, it was always like a point of discussion and kind of like, oh, we'll figure that out when we're ready. But the basic mythology of it was always known to them.
Yeah. I would love to dive into the Creel house a little bit more because it's such a centerpiece of the season, and as you said, has to kind of exist in like 5 different states. What was sort of the inspiration behind the look of that? I know I got like a lot of homages to maybe like the It house or kind of
Sure.
classic haunted houses like that. Where did you begin from?
Sure. I mean, I think it's very clearly it was our chance to kind of do the Stranger Things version of the sort of quintessential haunted house. I mean, of course, we're very aware of like the dozens of haunted houses that came before, the It house being one of them, of course. And, I don't know, your Salem's Lot house. I mean, you can kind of go on with the list. And I mean, we didn't want to do an exact copy of anything that had been previously done. So it was actually kind of a long process. And fortunately, in and around Atlanta and the sort of greater Atlanta area and Georgia, there's lots of these great old Victorian homes. But we searched and searched and searched, and we were really looking for something that had that heavy, imposing sort of mansard roof profile. And we ended up going to a place called Rome, Georgia, which is quite a ways outside of Atlanta, because this place that we found just had such a distinct weight and this imposing presence. So yeah, that the first step was just finding a location that was, that spoke to sort of our inspiration, but also was uniquely its own sort of presence. And then yeah, then once we found that, we were lucky. The interior was just really an amazing inspiration, and as far as like the main floor of it was exactly what we wanted architecturally. So we kind of used it, quite a bit of it we reproduced in painstaking detail. I mean, the house had like just incredible, unique, handcrafted woodwork, all the stair railing, the newel posts, all of the built-in bookshelves, and like all this incredible sort of built-in woodwork. So we definitely took our cues from that, and in some cases we were able to just we surveyed the whole house, and we just fastidiously recreated the elements that we really loved. And then it was such a big house that we were able to invent the sort of geography of the upstairs floors and the attic, and to kind of make it work for us. So yeah, it was a process for sure.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is a lot of pivotal moments here take place in the Hawkins lab, which is such a kind of cold, sterile environment. How do you create a set like that that is sterile but also engaging and interesting on screen?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, from the first seasons, we all really loved Hawkins Lab as sort of like the beginning of everything, in season 1. So, it's got this kind of central role in the sort of, in so much of like Eleven's backstory and just the mythology of Stranger Things. So, yeah, we always knew that the Rainbow Room was sort of integral to this whole to the whole program of the numbers and 11, and we knew that there were a number of, you know, that she had existed in this space with other kids at one point. So um, we were just waiting for this opportunity to sort of flesh out the rest of what that, you know, that Hawkins Lab basement world felt like. And, you know, the Rainbow Room was always going to be the centerpiece of that sort of underground world. And our approach to that was, I mean, we just spent a lot of time researching institutional facilities for children, you know, throughout this 20th century, basically. And we landed, a lot of our inspiration ended up being from these sort of Scandinavian children's home and hospital facilities. Hence like the carpet wrap furniture and the kind of the clean lines, and everything has kind of got these hard antiseptic surfaces. But then we wanted to like infuse it with this sort of, you know, an attempt was made to make it feel like, you know, appropriate for children, but it's just fundamentally this cold, unpleasant space. And the rainbow, obviously, figuring out how to integrate the rainbow and make it like this really sort of iconic element in that space. That was probably the most satisfying part when we finally arrived at how to integrate the rainbow into the space. That was essential. I feel like the thing that I'm most pleased with maybe is the way the ceiling turned out in that space. I don't know if you can recall it, but and that actually was just a serendipitous inspiration that we got. I was scouting a school in New Mexico when we were looking for Lenora Hills High, and one of the locations we scouted just happened to have this administration building that had this amazing coffered ceiling with these sort of, you know, recessed fluorescent squares. And that was, as soon as we saw that, we were like, that's not what we're looking for in a high school, but is exactly what the ceiling wants to be in the Rainbow Room, you know. So, and then I mean, beyond that, it was just all about how do we accommodate these kind of long revelatory sequences of like, we need to be with 11 as she discovers this horror show, basically, in this kind of, you know, monotonous maze-like underground world. So it became all about how do we build a practical set that feels kind of, you know, labyrinthine, but is, you know, obviously fits within a soundstage. So that kind of became the big sort of hurdle, was like, how do we put this together in a way where we can shoot these long continuous shots and feel like we've never like retraced our steps, but also have it be practically, you know, achievable. So yeah, it was a fun one. It was a fun one to figure out.
Yeah, I like that it's an attempt at warmth. That's what I liked about it, because I just pictured a, you know, cold clinical doctor being like, yeah, this is good for kids, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
We did
Yeah,
the rainbow.
this satisfies their emotional needs. Yeah. Yeah.
Also not warm is the Russian prison, which is the new space for Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And that's massive. Here it serves as kind of like a gladiator arena for the Demogorgon battle. Was that a totally created space for you?
It was. I mean, we knew, you know, we had kind of started to allude to this this Kamchatkin sort of military installation in the season 3, you know, where they're doing where we initially see the Russians working on their laser to open up. So we knew that it was meant to be kind of connected to that world. But as we were coming into this season, we wanted also to have the feeling of these sort of Siberian labor camps, essentially. So we did a lot of research into what those would have looked like. And knowing, of course, that the centerpiece of that kind of world was going to be this Demogorgon gladiatorial sort of prison yard. So the way, for me, I mean, I always need to justify it by saying there's some world where we could ground this in reality. If I'm pressed, I need to have a sense of like, you know, this is motivated by some real world architectural situation. And the way we motivated the whole Demogorgon gladiator pit was that would have been a prison yard, essentially, like an open air prison yard, multi-tiered sides, you know. So that was kind of the inspiration for that. But you know, we shot in Lithuania for a decent bit of our you know, when we're in that sort of you know, Soviet town where the church is and that. we spent some time there, and in Vilnius, Lithuania, we found this incredible old like Tsarist era prison called Lukiškis. And it had only been recently decommissioned. It was very bleak and very frightening on the inside, and just so it was like very obvious and direct inspiration. In some cases, some of the auxiliary rooms that we created off of the hallways and that were directly reproducing rooms that exist in that Lithuanian prison. But yeah, I mean, we had to completely kind of from scratch invent this prison yard gladiatorial situation, and it was inspired, by the sort of brutalist concrete architecture that we had always been imagining for it, and then the Lukiškis prison ended up kind of informing some of the other more specific architectural details and some of the metalwork and the style of some of the cages and but as is often the case with the show, as we're figuring out, we solve one thing, it just expands as we're shooting. Like the brothers are oftentimes inventing like, oh, well, let's go in this direction a little bit too. So even though we kind of know where we're at and what the story is, like as we're shooting, sometimes a new inspiration will occur, and it's like, oh, well, let's add this room and it needs to connect to this room. So over time we ended up with this complex of tunnels that connected off of the Demogorgon fighting pit, and it turned into, when we ended up taking up the vast majority of a huge soundstage with this, like, again, another labyrinth of tunnels and interconnected rooms. And yeah, it was epic.
Well, I would love to know, before we have to finish up, you've been working on this show for a long time. You created sets that are based in places all over the world and even not of this world. But with one season left of this series, is there anything that you haven't done that you're like, I really hope we get to explore some other space or see a piece of another character? Is there something you haven't done yet?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, there's nothing I feel like, oh, we haven't been able to touch on this or that thing. No spoilers, but there's some
No
really
spoilers.
exciting stuff coming up in season 5. And I'll be honest, anything that is yet unexplored is already on the horizon. So I'm sort of mentally gearing myself up now as we speak for where we're going in season 5. And I think that all of my hopes in terms of sets that are yet to be explored are going to be realized, I think, pretty soon.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. We can't
Yeah.
wait to see what happens. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining me. Congrats again on the Emmy nomination. And for
Yeah.
everyone watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby and stay with us throughout the rest of the season.
Thanks for having
Chris.
me.